All right. Welcome everybody to this very important call. I would like to thank everybody on the call and draw attention while they're here and recognize also our sponsors and some of the university personalities. But before we get into that, I would just like to draw attention that this is our first joining the United Nations and UNESCO to celebrate the World Day for African and Afro-descendant cultures, which is a day set aside to celebrate the many vibrant cultures of the African continent and the diaspora around the world. The UNESCO, as well as the United Nations, jointly believe that by celebrating this day, it is a way to promote effective and sustainable development, as well as dialogue that could guarantee peace on the African continent and peace between those on the continent and those in the diaspora. They also believe it is a rich source for the world to share and promote this African and Afro-descendant culture and heritage, not only to the benefit of the continent, but the benefit of humanity as a whole. Having said that, I would first of all like to acknowledge our sponsors, the Andrew Mellon Foundation, the Tuskegee University Senate, with the Faculty Senate Chair here present, the National Park Services, the College of Arts and Sciences, with numerous of my colleagues of that college here present, the College of Agriculture, Environment and Nutrition Sciences, the Department of Languages, Communication, and Philosophy, without forgetting the Office of the Provost. And the Office of the Provost is well represented here. And I did see Dr. Russell on the call. Maybe I'll defer to him to say a word before I call on the person to introduce our speaker, to introduce us to our speaker. Dr. Russell, can you give us a word of encouragement from the Office of the Provost? Thank you.
I didn't intend to be put on the spot, but
no.
I just want to say that I appreciate the opportunity to represent our office, and I'm thankful to see so many people logged in. That's a blessing. And I know that this is going to be a blessing to many. So thank you for setting this up. Thank you to our sponsors, and we appreciate everything that you're doing, Dr. Indy, with this seminar series.
Thank you very much. All right. I will now proceed to calling on Miss Timia Mason, a rising sophomore nursing major here at Tuskegee, to introduce us to the speaker of this event.
Hello, everyone.
You have the floor.
All right. Hello, everyone. I am Tamia Mason, a sophomore nursing major, just striving to, be a great professional technical writer with Dr. Indy class. So I'm very pleased to have this opportunity to introduce our speaker for today. So let me start by saying Happy World Day for African and Afro-descendant culture. I have the distinguished honor of presenting our speaker for this event, Professor Elizabeth Ayukatang. Elizabeth Ayukatane is an IIE Scholar Rescue Fund Fellow at the University of California, Santa Barbara, an Indigenous feminist and an Associate Professor of African Discourse, University of Buea, Cameroon. She holds a PhD in Black women's writing and ecofeminism from the University of Yaoundé, Cameroon. She has about 14 articles in peer-reviewed journals, 7 book chapters, a co-author to a book. She is a prominent and established scholar in African and American diasporic discourse. Her research and teaching interests play to every campus strengths, environmental studies, comparative literature, Black studies, as well as feminist studies, with focus on indigenous knowledge, cultural studies, environmental humanities, and ecofeminism. She is a recipient of several awards, amongst which are the African Women Development Fund, CODISARA Higher Education Policy Initiative 2019, and University of Michigan African Presidential Scholar, MAPS, in 2015 Fellowship, International Institute of Education and Scholar Rescue Fund of 2022. Scholars at Risk, SAR Committee, and a recipient of the Janet Hennessy Dillis Snyder Scholar Rescue Award in the Arts of 2022. Dr. Ayukatane belongs to many associations, amongst which are African Studies Association, Women Caucus, and the Association of Women in Mythology, Association of Literature and the Environment, Continental Education Strategy for Africa, hosted by the African Union and a founding member of a Women of Higher Education Network in Africa. So let's give Dr. Ayukatane a warm Tuskegee welcome to you.
You know.
All right.
Okay, Dr. Ayukatane, you have the floor. You can unmute yourself. I see you still muted.
Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. I really feel humble, and I want to thank my colleagues. I want to thank the students who are here present for this seminar. I want to thank the Tuskegee University, especially Professor Birndi, for giving me this opportunity to present my academic research. I also want to thank the Institute of Education Scholar Rescue Fund, Scholars at Risk, and I want to thank the University of California, Santa Barbara for enabling me demonstrate my academic stewardship. I'm so grateful. I will start by saying that today we'll be listening or discussing, because I want this to be a conversation. So we'll be conversing on the Indigenous African Religion, otherwise in other forum known as African Traditional Religions. A lot has been done as far as African Traditional Religion is concerned. Dissertations have been defended, theses have been written, scholarly articles, publications on African Traditional Religion. And I see it as a stronghold of research where everybody wants to have an idea of what Africans think about their religion. I'm going to give a panoramic view of what African Traditional Religion is all about. And from there, I'm going to put the African Traditional Religion practices on the same platform with some other religions, such as Christianity, for us to see where they converge and their divergences. And so we'll structure this talk into 5 sections. The first part, we're going to have an overview of what African Traditional Religion is. And I will start by saying that let me start by saying something as far as indigenous knowledge is concerned. because this is gaining scholarship internationally. Indigenous knowledge is making a comeback. According to Njo Ambe in 2023, a blog he just published about 2 weeks ago, I just realized that indigenous knowledge has become a favorite buzzword in international development. So leading aid donors are vying for positions in a race to incorporate indigenous knowledge in their development projects and programs. The World Bank now has an indigenous knowledge program. And so, not to be outdone, the United States White House Office of Science and Technology Policy and the White House Council on Environmental Quality has just jointly issued government-wide guidance on indigenous knowledge. It explores federal agency working in non-Western settings to recognize and include indigenous knowledge in their research, policy, and decision-making agendas. This marks a remarkable revival for indigenous knowledge in international development thinking. African being the melting pot of most research projects is usually the starting point in belief systems, and it has attracted a lot of criticism in the knowledge production of indigenous knowledge. So indigenous African religion is built on African cultural practices with a multiple layered of traditional values informed by varied ethnic identities. African traditional religion is a way of life of the African people. It is not a one-size-fits-all like other religious practices, but varies in different ethnic groups. There might be some similarities depending on the cultural affiliations of the people. However, the notion of a supreme being is indisputable in African cosmology. The supreme being is acknowledged as controller of the universe. Africans recognize and worship him for who he is. John Beatty in African Religions and Philosophy explains that in worshiping God, Africans have no creeds to recite. Their creeds are within them, in their blood and in their hearts. So every practitioner of African traditional religion has an individual creed, which is recited during rites of passage, rituals, initiation, or wherever necessary. This is an oral tradition which is imbibed in the cultural heritage of the people, acquired informally by doing and participating. I got that at least from Beek 2020. With the advent of burgeoning Pentecostalism and charismatic churches in Africa, African traditional religions has experienced assaults and bastardization. The objective is to brainwash the Africans off their belief system and install the other religious practices. Of course, this is from the erstwhile colonial masters' vision. However, since the mind of man is pliable, this created an amalgamation of different religious practices in the African society without sponging off the indigenous belief. So the African religious worldview, we are going to look at what the African religious worldview is. It is a fallacy to say that Africans have no notion of God before the advent of the burgeoning Western religions. Beatty rightly puts it that African traditional religions start before birth and does not stop after death. So we can imagine it is a cyclical religion. So African traditional religion is a philosophy. Camara, in regaining our African aesthetics and essence through our African traditional religion, sees African traditional religion as the observance of rule, and I quote, of conduct in the ways the African conduct his or her daily life, the practice of rituals, and the recognition of the overpresence of the living dead, that's ancestors, to allow the person to coexist in harmony with other members of the community in order to please God. So many narratives and discourses on Africa has attested to the fact that Africans did not hear the notion of the supreme being or God from the West. We can get that from Chinua Achebe's Things Fall Apart, where he says before the arrival of the white man, they had their way of doing things. And of course, if we say African religion is built on African ethos, they had a structured life. We can also get that from Tom Jing's The Tale of the African Woman, who sees the pre-colonial, the colonial, and the post-colonial system with the arrival of the missionary in the African continent. We also have that in so many write-ups like Njo Anakumi, testifying to the fact that Africans did not hear of God for the first time with the arrival of maybe the missionaries or other religions, or from the received religions. So the impact of religion. So Africans believe in a supreme being, like I said before, who is known to be the creator and controller of the universe. So Africa also believes in other spiritual beings, like deities and ancestors, who are said to influence the life and activities of humanity. There is a hierarchical order of the spirit world which parallels the Judeo-Christian tradition, especially Catholicism. So in African traditional religions worldview, there are two simultaneous interpreting worlds. One, the visible, and two, the invisible world. For example, in the Igbo religion, there is always an unhindered intervention from the spirit world into the physical world. This means there is no obstacle to the spirit to influence or directly intervene in the affairs of those in the physical world. So Mithu in African religion puts it succinctly. What does Mithu tell us? He says, all beings known to the Igbos belong to either the two worlds. So you and I, the physical world and the spiritual world, the visible and the invisible world. The visible world is peopled by men and contains material surrounding, familiar to man. The invisible world is the spirit world. Here is the abode of the creator, which the Igbo people call Chukwu, and the deities and ancestors. In Ghana and most West and Central African societies, some deities are considered tribal gods, personal gods, community gods, etc. These deities, like the case of the Earth goddess, which the Igbo called Ani, is probity and very powerful. She is very proactive and doesn't act on lie. In African mythology and philosophy, these gods or deities are said to have been created by God. So what is the notion of God in African and Judeo-Christian religion? Let's look at that. The representation of God and other spiritual beings in African traditional religions parallel Judeo-Christian religion at different tiers. As mentioned earlier, Africans believe in the existence of a supreme being, yes, which is known as God or Allah or Ndem in other languages. Africans have a way of calling them different appellations, like BT will tell us. and more in different religious practices. To the African traditional religion practitioners, as well as to the Judeo-Christian traditions, he is the creator of the universe. That's heaven and earth. He is the highest in the spiritual realm that controls and influences growth and life in animals and plants. In fact, according to the Igbo tradition, he gives each man at the time of his birth his personal God, whom the Igbo people call Chi, his personal Chi. As immediately below this supreme being, we have his messengers with different roles assigned to them. So in the Judeo-Christian traditions, these messengers are likened to angels, with their boss known as the archangel. In African traditional religions, the messengers are equated to the deities, just below the supreme being, as the angels are below God or the Almighty God. So these deities are known as gods and goddesses. There are also different roles assigned to these gods, such as the personal god, the god of the sky, the earth goddess, or god of fertility, etc. Amongst these deities, too, some are more influential, like the archangel. In the Igbo tradition or religion, Ani, the earth goddess, is considered to be very powerful. She is the guardian of morality, the controller of the minor gods of fortune and economic life. She works in the spirit of the living dead to order the prohibitions and ritual avoidances. She ensures health, agriculture, and other fortunes. Okoro Damashos confirms that she is regarded as the mother of plants, animals, and other terrestrial beings. So Ani in African traditional religions can be placed on the same platform as the archangel. And in Catholicism or Judeo-Christian religion, if we say the archangel, one that we know is Angel Gabriel, and Ani is female, the goddess is like the archangel, then we see that African traditional religion is gender sensitive. Another messenger below the angels are the saints. Saints are heavenly beings. In a typical Roman Catholic or Orthodox tradition, they are canonized. They can't be canonized when they are alive. So they are spirits of the dead in the same way. African traditional religion reverence their ancestors who are spirits of the living dead. Not all living dead are ancestors. Your good deeds on earth, your age, and many other qualities qualifies you as an ancestor. Let's look at the fourth tier. We've seen the first three. Let's look at the fourth tier in the spiritual. After the spiritual, to see how African traditional religion parallels the Judeo-Christian tradition, and then how the Judeo-Christian tradition thinks African are fetish or polytheist. Meanwhile, they also copy, or they are like moving together. The fourth tier of the hierarchical order in the Judeo-Christian religion, with Catholicism as our example, is the priest. The priest administers the church sacraments, which are considered by many religious scholars as church rituals. On the other hand, African traditional religions have priests as well, or priestesses, who are diviners, herbalists, healers, and you name them. Although in some other academic fora, they have been considered as witch doctors. Some critics see that as Western arrogance to African religious practices. However, their shrines, forests, and sacred groves are also recognized as their place of worship. They don't worship God by reciting creeds, but through rituals and incantations. Note that the incantations are usually channeled by man from the priest, through the ancestors, through the deities, and then to the supreme being. So African cosmology has been represented as fetish and accused of polytheism. But from the foreground analysis, I think this is a downplay of African traditional religion, because it has all its religious structure in place before the invasion of received religions. Christianity, on the other hand, is assumed to be a classical religion celebrating three persons in one God. Of course, we know God the Father, God the Son, and God the Holy Spirit. A concept which to many African traditional religion scholars is still inconclusive as the standard. Rather, its practitioners are accused of practicing Trinitarian monotheism. So I want us to look at the strength of African religion. We've discussed African religion, we've put it side by side with Christian religion, and I want us to look at generally and like a take-home message, the strength of African traditional religion. So we say African traditional religion is not monolithic. One is not compelled to follow the religious rites of another African religious tradition. So each ethnic group has their own practices depending on their cultural values. In other words, it gives room to freedom of worship. Unlike in other traditions, that's Christian religious traditions, particularly the same gospel reading read in Washington, D.C. is the same that is read in Hawaii. For instance, if a church service, a gospel is taken from the book of Matthew, chapter 1, that is what is read the world over on that same day according to their liturgical calibrations. But with African traditional religion, depending on what the initiation or the ritual is, it is not monolithic. African traditional religion is not studied like you study the doctrine classes in Christian traditions. It is a way of life, and in that way, the tradition is oral and easily transmitted, unlike the printed scriptures and doctrines of other religious traditions. So there is no Bible, there is no book that you use to preach or teach African traditional religion. So it is a way that the people practice. And so one of my arguments when I submitted my abstract, I was saying that with the coming of the received religion, so many scholars think that African traditional religion will be phased out, especially with the advent of Pentecostalism and the rest in Africa. But then, how do you take out people's standard, their life from them? And so I keep saying that there is no doctrine to be taught. Yeah, they might receive the other religions, but then they benefit like a form of hybridity, but not rejecting their religion completely. Africans don't spill blood whimsically. Of course, if you sit here and something just happens in a Christian forum, the first thing you will get is blood of Jesus, blood of Jesus. But Africans don't spill blood because they can't just be doing that. Truth be told, they use animals, they might use some other environmental, which of course we are trying to look at that to use as sacrifices to work out issues when it comes to whatever is necessary, but not just spilling blood. African traditional religions differ from one culture to the other. It is dynamic, flexible, and adaptable, but not stagnant. So there is not one size fits all. Like I said, it is not something that you just say, okay, this is how we do it. It depends on how you're supposed to do it at that time. If it says, okay, you're supposed to spill palm wine, you're supposed to use palm wine for your rituals, palm wine is what you're supposed to use. If they say you need to spirit cola nut and throw it out, cola nut is what you're supposed to use and not palm wine. So it is not stagnant. It is indigenous in nature. And so humans in particular are more likely to relate to what is attentive to their natural environment and habitats. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. Thank you very much for listening. I see people smiling. I hope we're going to have a very interactive session right now with the Q&A. And please, if there is anything that you want to find out, and as far as the Indigenous African religion is concerned, which has not been discussed, please feel free. We can even discuss after now. Professor Birnde is going to put up my email address out there, and you always get in touch with me. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very, very, very much, Professor Yuketang. And I would seize this opportunity before I open the floor for Q&A to acknowledge the chair of the Faculty Senate. I see our Dean of Students is on the call, and my colleagues in the department or in the university, many of them are on the call. I just want to thank and acknowledge them. And we have the opportunity to engage after listening to this conversation, which should actually stimulate our thinking as a people with a history, with a rich history that maybe colonialism has tried to rewrite, and we have been, tagging along and holding strong to it. We should now engage in a discussion that will clarify even where we are in our belief system, whether we've become Christians, Muslims, Jewish. I would like to thank this presentation because there is one thing I've taken away: the fact that this is a religion that does not prone a form of fanaticism. It is very rare to see, because if everybody is doing what they are doing where they are doing it, then there is no room for somebody to say my religion is better than yours, which has characterized our modern world and is the source of major conflicts dating back from the 100 Years' War. So the floor is open for questions. If you have a question, unmute or raise hands. If not, you can ask your question on the chat. Then I would read out the questions. Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Zaria Napier. I have a question. As far as he said, it's no books or no scripture or something or sort of like that. Do you have do we have like an actual location as like a church, how African Americans like have a actual building, or is it just anywhere that you plan to worship?
Dr. Ayuketang, that question is for you. Did you get the question?
Yes, I did.
All right.
I just want to say that how are we doing it? Am I responding one
Yes,
after
respond
the other?
one after the other. Respond one after the other. That's fine.
Okay, thank you. So thank you very much for the question. Like I said earlier in my presentation, yes, there is no book like a scripture to be followed in practicing African or indigenous African religion. There are no church houses, but I think if the way the Africans practice their religion, like I said, is varied. It might be in shrines, it might be in sacred groves, it might be in your bedroom. It depends on where and what you need. So usually they don't have a church house where they sit, and like I said, they don't recreate like I believe in God the Father Almighty. No, they don't do that. If you need your ancestor, if you realize that you need to do something with them, you just look for what is needed, you do the incantations, and then you move on with that. So you might even, for instance, let me say, you build a new house, you want people to visit your house, and everything in Africa is meaningful. The animates and the inanimates, they are all meaningful. Africans have a lot of symbols. And so all the symbols are there, they are meaningful. Even the stone is meaningful. I know people will say, oh, why do they worship stones? No, they don't worship, but I'm saying that it's meaningful. So when people are coming to your house, you might just want to invite your ancestors. Oh, I'm having this guest today, and you have a drink. You pour on your door and you say, as I'm having this guest, oh, nobody should come here hurt. Everybody that is planning to come here should get in here well, and they shouldn't face any problem. And while in my house, we must make sure that everybody is fine. So by the time you have your guests until they leave your house, you make sure that everybody's, and you just go and invite them to know that you have people and you'll be sitting with them. So that you don't need any church to go and say, oh, tomorrow I'll be having guests. But then if you need a priest or a diviner or a soothsayer, then you might want to go to their shrines. You might want to go to the sacred forest. You might also want to go to maybe the sacred groves, and then you get connected directly with the spiritual world. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Dr. Esunga, before I take you, I saw a hand before. Micah, you had a question. After that, Dr. Esunga. There are some questions coming on the chat. We will proceed after all those who want to intervene personally. Micah, are you still there?
It's Micaiah.
Oh, Micaiah.
Yeah, I'm still here.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I had a question following the statement that you said not all living dead are ancestors, and then you went into what specifically makes an ancestor, but I missed it, and I was wondering if you could repeat it because it seemed very interesting to me.
Okay, thank you so much for your question.
Okay.
Ancestors is not a given. And there are laid down principles in indigenous African religion and the African community that qualifies somebody as an ancestor. And before you become an ancestor, John Beatty doesn't even like the word ancestor. He calls them living dead. But before you qualify as an ancestor, you must be able to have proven your worth in your community. You must at least be of a certain age, and then your character must be approved. For instance, if you are a thief and you keep destroying people, and trust me, when you die, you cannot be qualified as an ancestor. And even your own family members whom you used to harass when you were alive will not use your name in incantations to say, oh, maybe Michael, oh, we pray you should watch over us. They won't, because they know that even when you were alive, you did not prove your worth as somebody who could watch over your people. So, like I said, so before you become an ancestor, there are certain characteristics that you must acquire. And so that's why we say there are some good and bad ancestors, because if we claim that all living dead are ancestors, then some are not qualified as ancestors and they don't use them, you know, as ancestors. Remember, your ancestors are watching over you. Africans believe in life after that. And that is why BT says their birth and their death. Their birth and their death, that's why we say it's cyclical. I just saw somebody's question, and what do I mean by the cyclical nature? It's cyclical because they believe that there is life after death. So if you're a good man on earth, even when you die, you remain a good man. And if you're a bad man, of course, you remain a bad man. And how does the cycle continue? The cycle continues because now when you are dead, you're not gone. They believe that you've taken another step of your life. And where they are, if they are ancestors, they are qualified as ancestors, they now watch over their families. And in most African gatherings and settings, you will hear people saying that, why should a young child die? Of course, those ancestors should be able to protect the child, you know, because there are certain things that when you do and it's not working, the ancestors will alert, and maybe you need to pacify them. Maybe there are one or two things that you have to do to move on with your life. So I don't know if I answered the question of the cyclical nature of the Africans, because I saw that question, somebody put it on the chat, so I just copied it out. Thank you. Does that make sense to you? Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Esunga.
Thank you, Professor Ndi. Thank you, Dr. Ayuk Etang, very much. It's an honor to listen to you and a great pleasure. Thank you. I was listening to you, and I'm African myself, and I'm Christian. And my question to you is, if Africans had traditional religions of their own, why is it that in the continent, we were so eager to embrace the religions of others, right? So in Africa, we are either, Judeo-Christians, maybe Muslim, right? Where are our traditional religions then? If we had these, how come is it that we just abandon them to embrace the religions of others, of other people, of the colonizers and whatnot?
Thank you so much. Very much appreciated. A beautiful question. And, I didn't want to talk on that because I was expecting it during the Q&A. But I made mention, the erstwhile colonial masters came. And when they came, they brought in their own religion. Like I said, I kept saying that they are received religion. And as a received religion, they came and they tried to impose it on us. Remember, Karl Marx said, religion was used as the opium of the people. For instance, if you're sick and somebody comes and tells you, oh, you're going to get well immediately, Father, heal him. You, because you are in a desperate situation, you want healing. And of course, you embrace it and you keep looking for him. Oh, that my leg just got better. Or I still feel sick. Can you pray for me? They use every tactic to get to us. And another thing I want to say is that Africans, I'll put it quote unquote, are considered to be poor. And so when they came and they said, oh, when you come to God, you're going to have miracle money, people rush for miracles and they prophesy. And how do you consider these prophecies? And with what the diviners and the suits do? One thing I want to say is that the African or the indigenous African religion was not abandoned. It has never been abandoned. It's right there. But if you believe in it, you know what you're supposed to do. And like I said, the amalgamation of the Christian religion has made the Africans now to be hybrids, because there is this form of hybridity now. It has never been abandoned. And if I say it's a way of life of the people, which means it is built on their cultural practices. And if you practice your culture in Africa, then you're practicing your religion. And if you disregard the culture, then you're disregarding the religion. One thing I want to say, my beloved sister from Africa, when I was growing up, you walk on the street, you're going to visit somebody, maybe somebody who owes your money. You kick your right leg. The first thing that comes to your mind is, oh yeah, he's there and he's going to pay my money. You used to know that, right? Great. And once it is the left leg, what happens? It's like, oh, I missed it out. And when you get there, it happens. What has just happened to you? Your personal chi, that personal God, that when you were given birth to, they gave you your innermost mind, and the man in you is what makes that religion come to fruition. And so it has not been abandoned, but many people claim they don't want to practice it because it is fetish. This is a way of brainwashing the Africans. If they tell you, oh, you see, you're trying to worship, you're trying to do idol worships. These are not idol worships, they are symbols. Africans have all the other symbols, like the Christians have the rosaries, they have all those other ornaments who are also symbols. But we don't criticize. It's just a way of, it's a mindset. It's a mindset that makes you feel what you have is not good. And the grass is always greener in a neighbor's garden. Thank you.
Thank
Professor Bill, if you don't mind, there is another question I saw.
Okay.
Challenges to get to where you are.
Yes.
Okay. I don't know who brought that, but if you don't mind, let me answer
that's
that.
Mr. Corey Anderson.
Okay.
What were the challenges that you had to get through, to go through to get where you are?
Okay. I want to thank you so much, because it's a very nice, I like this. And I want to say that with the advent of Judeo-Christian religion coming through the missionaries and, you know, other religion practices in Africa, the whole idea of wiping off or erasing the African indigenous religion has been a battle. But I want to tell you that there are no challenges if you know what you want. There are no challenges. Many scholars of African religion are not practitioners, or they are both. And many practitioners of African religions, some are not scholars. I will tell you, John Beatty was an Anglican priest. Professor Olupona, also a renowned scholar of African religion in Harvard University, father was an Anglican priest. And so you see, they coming from this background of Christianity and then talking so much on African religion, I think is a plus, because they have witnessed both worlds and they know that this is a religion that the struggle is there. They have bastardized African religion. They have insulted them. But then the African people just keep moving. It's their way of life, from their dressing to the way they talk, to the way they exclaim. So I, as an indigenous African a scholar, I had no challenge because I'm a practitioner. I'm not a priest, but I believe in African traditional religion, and I'm a scholar. And so I try to read what others have written. I see what is being done when I was growing up to today. I follow the different rites of initiations into, when they give birth to you, you're being initiated. You're being also initiated into womanhood when you see your first menses, and also initiated in marriage. So I followed through, I've been through all those processes, and I don't see anything wrong because I'm the same. There is no secret thing that is done. It's just a way of life to acknowledge the fact that you're a woman. And so I have been through that. And as an ecofeminist, I recognize the eco-spirituality, the relationship between women and nature and the spiritual world, where women are connected to nature through the deities and maybe the goddess and the goddesses, and even the goddess of fertility, which of course, if I'm a woman like I am today, and I'm facing barrenness, the first thing that happens is, oh, what happened to her? What happened to the goddess, the earth goddess? And all those rituals will be performed, and the incantations. And if you've read many narratives of African discourses, you will see that 90% of such cases or scenarios, after those rituals and incantations, those barren women become pregnant. It is not a given. It is not medically proven, but they are herbal treatments and incantations that you do. And of course, it happens. Maybe because of one little thing that you did not do to pacify your ancestors or your gods. Now you've done it and things move on. So it's a very rich history and a very rich practice. Thank you.
All right, let's continue with some of the questions. There is a question from Sana Moore, trying to find out if it is true that Christianity has been influenced by the ancient Egyptians. What do you have to say?
Okay, Christianity has been influenced by ancient Egyptians. We all know that the history of Egypt and the ancient Egyptian records of history of Africa the civilization started from Egypt. And I want to say that the Africans presently, with the received religion, has penetrated the continent. And in the northern part of Africa, not North Africa, but the northern part in most African countries, they are being influenced. And like in the southern part of Nigeria, Cameroon, you name them, Ghana, they are being influenced by Christianity. And this Christianity, writers have told us God was African and all of that. So I don't have much as far as talking about the ancient civilization starting from Egypt. I don't think I did a lot of work on that. My focus was less on that, but then I think we can discuss that some other time.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Russell would like you to elaborate on the statement that you made about, African religion not spilling blood.
Right. African religion, I made this statement meaningfully. I actually meant what I said. African religion is not concentrated on, oh, something bad is about to happen to me, and then like the Christian religion, the Orthodoxies, some other practices, and this idea of spilling the blood of Jesus, the blood of God, the blood of the Lamb, the blood that sets people free, the blood. Africans don't believe in that blood. If they have difficulties, and maybe from the diviner, they need an animal or something to pacify the spiritual world or the invisible world, they will then go for what they need. They don't use only animals. They use animals as well as they use other things. But it is not something that spontaneously you keep doing it, and you go to churches, and it is like, if they don't spill that blood, their sins, they will not be cleansed from their sins or from something evil that is about to happen. No. Of course, if they know that this is what we are supposed to do in order to cleanse the sins, they go for it. I did not say they don't spill blood, I said they don't spill blood whimsically. So it's not like every now and then they have the blood to be spilled. Have their own way of cleansing and pacifying the spirit world or the deities or the ancestors.
Okay, thank you. Let's continue. We have a few more questions. And the question comes from Riona, who would like to know some good recommendations you want for her to do further research about African customs and the impact of colonialism on African customs.
Thank you so much, Rihanna. I will recommend you, there is a lot to be written, but I will recommend you to also look at the role of women in African traditional religion, because women play a vital role in African traditional religion. And that is why in every African society, even when you have the chiefs, you have the female chiefs, that they don't call them female chiefs, but there are different appellations, who actually help to boost the practice. So I would like you to look at the role of women in African traditional religion. John Beatty did something, but it can be, expanded. And if you do that, you can actually place it with the role of women in Judeo-Christian religion, and you will come out with something succinct. That will be my recommendation, because I know a lot as far as women are concerned in African traditional religion. Their connectivity to the spiritual world means a lot to Africans. And you will want to know that most of the powerful gods in Africa are female gods or female goddesses. They are deities, female deities, and they play magnificent roles in African religion or traditional religious practices. Thank you.
All right, let's continue. Mr. Wade McCant wants you to elaborate on the mention you made about African religion being a cycle that starts from birth and goes through death, that you should elaborate.
Okay, I think the explanation I gave when I answered the other question, I touched on that, he didn't get it. What I'm trying to say, African religion, African traditional or indigenous African religion is a cycle. We have, when a child is given birth, that child is welcome into the world. And when that child comes, like I mentioned, we had an example from the Igbo people or the Igbo religion. The Igbo people believe that a child is born with his personal God. So the day you are born, you have a God that is your personal chi that takes care of you. And so as you grow up, you are being initiated, and maybe you get into adulthood, and then at the end of the day, when you die, you don't die. It's a repetition. It's a repetition. And that is why they think that in Africa, when you die, you are not dead. That you are a living dead, because you still watch over your families and you are an ancestor. And if you read Wole Soyinka's Death and the King's Husband, when the king had to be buried, they had to bury the king with his husband, because they felt that as an African, if you are a king in your life, I mean, when you're living, when you die, you remain a king. Unlike, I read this point when I was in secondary school, I don't know if it was In Memoriam, where they say authority forgets a dying king with the Western concept, because when you die, as you die, your authority is gone. But with Africans, they think you still have your place. And that is why if you qualify as an ancestor, they keep calling you. You've not ended. That's why we say it's a circle. And I want to say this again for those who want to know. Africans have this concept of, the Yoruba call them abiku, and Nigerians call them obanje, and even in the Manu era of Cameroon, we call them obanje or etengene. What happens is these are children that when you give birth to them, maybe because of some reason or the other, or they are not comfortable, they die. And maybe after 1 year you want to give birth, you still give birth to that same children. And if you read Wole Soyinka's poem on Abiku, or who is this?
John Pepper Clark.
Yes, J.P. Clark on Abiku. He says, I am Abiku, calling for one and the repeated time. You know, these are people who go and they come back. And what Africans do to show that this is true, maybe they want to put a mark on the face of that child, and that child comes back with that same mark. And when he comes back, he doesn't go, because now they have recognized that he's the one. So it is a circle. And then they now try to see, oh, so you are the one, and they know how to treat the child. Maybe there was something they find out from the priest or the herbalist or the diviner on how to manage the child, for the child to see. And then Abikus are very proud, or Obanje, because I think it's in J.P. Clark's poem, he said, I'm the slippery serpent coiled at that doorstep, yours the killing cry. When you try to kill me, as you see me every day, you think I'm gone. I'm that serpent that when you see me, you are like, hey, it's still here. Do you take it for granted? Of course not. So these are the things we mentioned, and we are saying that it is a circle. It's a lot to be discussed as far as this religion and the practices are concerned. If you believe in them, it works for you. If you don't, then you don't know about it, so you don't have anything to worry about them. Thank you.
Okay, let's continue. Dr. Russell asked another question about hierarchy and would like to know, how does one become a priest in African traditional religion?
Happy African Descendant Day. I'm so happy, because to become a priest in African traditional religion is a process. And that process, you must, there are different, I think there are about six layers to be followed. But the first one is a calling. And that calling, you might be called by the deities, you might be called by the ancestors. And how do you know you are called? The manifestation is in you. It manifests itself. And then the people, the soothsayers and the diviners and the herbalists who see it, they all come together and say, oh, this has been called as one of us. This is a priest. We need to keep him. The first thing they do is they take you and they seclude you from the entire society. They keep you. They try to treat you, because now where you are, you keep talking. Soothsayer, you might even start recounting things of that society that is going to happen, or things that have happened, or something that people did not even know. So they keep you, they listen to you, and they start treating you. And when they treat you, they keep you out of women. And I like this, because this is when they try to build in your spirituality and to make it work. So they keep you, they seclude you from women, and they now try to work on you and then give you your different medications to strengthen that spirit in you. And they keep, maybe after some time, then you move on. The next one is, they might see some potentials in you, the clan or the chiefs. And they say that, okay, this is a potential chief priest. And they find out from soothsayers if it might work. And once they say yes, then they take you out of the crowd. And then they still go through the same process. to make you become a priest. So it is actually, it's not a given, and everybody can't just get up one day and say, okay, I'm now a priest or a herbalist or a traditional practitioner in Africa. No. And now as a priest, like the priest in Christianity who administer rituals in the church or church rituals, you start administering rituals in your community. Maybe there are things you need to tell the people as a diviner or a soothsayer. Maybe there are rituals that need to be carried out. They need to meet you so that you do that. Maybe you need to go to the water to pacify the water goddess. They do that through you. So you start administering all those rituals, the rites and the incantations. Now you are qualified to carry it out because you have been strengthened as a priest or a priestess.
Okay. All right, thanks for that response. We have a few more questions before I will call it a day. Elena Eldridge would like to know if there is a way one could redeem his or herself from bad actions, or will bad actions just continue to follow one in the African traditional religious context?
Oh, can you say that again, please? I didn't get it. I was
All
looking
right.
at
can one redeem themselves from bad actions, or will the bad actions just keep following them all the days of their lives?
Okay.
If there is a possibility of atonement of sins in African traditional religion, that's what I understand.
Of course. I want to use this opportunity to say that African religion is not about punishment. African religion is about bringing its people together. And so if there is a problem and then they say, oh, you didn't do this, one of the things you might want to do, they always tell you what you are supposed to do for your atonement. And like I said, I mentioned in my talk that the Igbo goddess, the deity, Annie is probity. Annie doesn't accept lies. So if your friend just gets up and go to the court or maybe go to the church and tell people that, oh, she did this to me, and in the African traditional setting, maybe the people will accept it, but the spirit will not. And if it is a lie, it falls on the person. So they don't. On the contrary, they try to make peace. And that is why they will always tell you, you have to do this for atonement of sin, as well as in Judeo-Christian, especially Catholic Church, you go for confession. And they say, oh, you forgive me. For those who don't go for confession, you pray and you say, oh, forgive me, I had sinned, and I did this, I did that, and I want to be born again. And they pray for you and they say, oh, now you are born again. With Africans, once your ancestors say, oh, I need you to put palm oil around my grave, just go and put the palm oil and your things move well. If you want to go to somewhere and you're expecting some positive things to happen to you, trust me, as soon as you do that, you get to that place, they are waiting for you. The favor is all yours because you are at peace with your ancestors. You are at peace with your maker. You are at peace with your personal God. Thank you.
All right, I think we have two more questions. There is one from Ms. Kathleen Robinson. If there is a way to learn about this, could you help enlighten her the possibilities of learning about the African traditional religion?
Thank you so much. Like I began my talk, I said indigenous knowledge is, is making, is coming back forcefully into research. And indigenous knowledge now is not limited only to history or to archives, but then I quoted African traditional religion as one. And if you want to get into this and to study more, I think there are books out there, there are scholars, and schools have started teaching African traditional religion, like my university here in Michigan. That is a course I will be teaching in the spring. And so when you teach the course for students who are interested and for people who want to learn more, of course, I can always share the bibliography, or citations of this presentation with you so that you read some more and you prepare yourself and then you see how you want to learn some more. But again, there is another thing that I always encourage students. I was in the University of Bloomsburg, University of Pennsylvania. I think that was in 2010 when I was doing research on my PhD. And we encourage students for the study abroad program, because there is something we say you learn by doing. When you visit, and for the study abroad program, most of the students went to Africa. And when they went to Africa, they visited the shrines, they visited the groves, they learned so many things, they got the names of and they actually saw for themselves. And I read this book, The Tale of an African Woman, and there is this white priest who was a missionary that went to one of the African countries, and he went and visited one of the diviners. As he entered, the diviner told him, your mom will have a problem and you will lose somebody in your life. And just started telling him about his life. He just said, oh, maybe this is not real. But trust me, when he came to pass, he said, oh my word, does it mean that this man actually saw me and saw my family far, far, far from in Ireland and could tell me things about me? Of course, people are doing that now in Africa, and they say they are prophesying, and they tell you, some even read about your life, which is not true. I mean, with the Christianity, and they tell you, I'm not saying that they are not true, but then they tell you about your life, and then you feel frightened. Then you start looking for ways of going out there to place them for atonement. So I think there is a way that African religion could be studied, and there are books that have been written, so many books that you can start by reading them. Like I said, I will share my citations and bibliography with you. And then if you have the way of visiting Africa, why not? You could. This cap I'm wearing is the title of a Mafo. A Mafo is a woman that has been accredited by a chief or a chiefdom or a kingdom. And so when they see you worth that title, they give you the title of a Mafo. And so when decisions are being taken into maybe your community, your village, they invite you to listen to people, especially if you are educated also or not educated, but then you're able to carry the plan, they give you that title. And then, they know that you'll be able to lead the women of that community.
All right, thank you. I think we have one last question. But before we go to that last question, I would just like to add to something you've said, which you brilliantly put about the issue of atonement. I'm just remembering one of our heroes, John Jerry Rawlings, who pointed out the sham in the Western trial system. And he mentioned a case where two people were arguing. They had stolen something. And one person was accusing the other. And in front of the judge, the other guy said, well, we come from the same village and we have a chief priest or a shrine. Let us go there and tell who stole this money. We will know who did it. The other guy stood in front of the judge and said, no, I'm not going anywhere. You decide he stole the money. Okay, right there, the African traditional religion had dominion by proving who was guilty in a Western setting. So thank you. Let me ask that last question, which is about your views on the cultural or religious rift between African-born, raised people and African Americans. What is your view on that rift?
I think African religion has traveled with the African people to the different places where they have been to, except people don't want to practice it. I don't think when they travel, like for instance, African religion went to Haiti and it gave birth to voodoo.
In Brazil.
in Brazil, and I think it's whether it's the whatever. But I want to say it has moved and it has gone places. And even in the US, the religion is still present. But now with affluence and other religious practices, and just like what is happening in Africa, the cultures are facing out, making way for those who think that they don't believe. Remember, I said it's a philosophy, and your philosophy is your belief, what they think about, what they know. So be it in the US or wherever they are, if what they hold firm is what they keep. But then if you think this is coming to me, I've been in the US and this is about 10th generation, we don't even know about it. I see it as not paying attention to your roots. I have African Americans or African descent, people of African descent in the US presently who would trace their DNA to Cameroon, where I come from. And they have been able to go back and reconnect with their ancestors and their roots. And trust me, I have Anita Diop, I have Lisa Aubrey. These are people I talk with in the US. They all even have titles in Africa because they went and decided to go to most of the shrines. They went to this water. They went to where their ancestors were being ferried, and they have tried to reconnect. So the whole idea of reconnection with your roots. And so when you reconnect, then you will be able to have at least something that you can hold as yours. But when you don't reconnect, like myth, it won't work for you. And that is why my talk is titled Myth and Representation. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. It has been wonderful. And I just want to point out from this wonderful presentation, I gather something which if I don't say, right, I will be remiss. You have pointed out a lot for the listeners on the call to take home. And there is something happening right before our noses here in the US that we are not paying attention on. Recently with the state of Florida telling us, right, that African American studies has no merit and has no value in education. This is an aberration of the first order. And I think for those of you on the call, you should learn to acknowledge, as Professor Elizabeth pointed out, there are epistemologies and ontologies that differs, meaning there are ways of knowing that is not just one-sided. It is not one size fits all, okay? The African worldview is that flexible. It is welcoming. It is not a worldview that prone fanaticism as opposed to the Western worldview where might is right because you think you have this, that is the only thing you would follow or you would want every person else to follow. Dr. Elizabeth, I didn't take the last word. I'm going to give you back the last word to give us one or two other comments if there are no questions before I release everybody to go. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Bilndi. Thank you all for attending. Thank you for having me. I'm so grateful. I just want to say, because we are celebrating this wonderful day, please, even if you are an African or an African American or of African descent, please hold tight to your culture, hold tight to your traditional values. One of the things that binds us together, or you and your family, is your language. Try to speak your language to your kids. They start from the language, and then they are dressing, and then other things follow. Let them have an idea about African traditional values, and then they should understand that the notion of God was not brought to Africa. Africans believe in a supreme being before the coming of colonialism with their colonial God. So the notion of God existed in Africa. So my take-home message is African traditional religion is flexible. It has multiple layers with different ethnic identities. And so different people have different practices depending on their cultural values. Thank you very much.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.